Hello.
Sunday evening ahead of our heading further northwards, as it were, from Yorkshire to Edinburgh and glorious prospect. And well, there was a chance at one point that this journey might not be happening this year, but it is. Yeah, hence your question, can the Edinburgh International Film Festival revive the magic in its 76th year? It could be one of those situations where a little bit of, not trial and error, that's not the word I'm looking for, but it is that it's been saved, of course, from not happening at all. Maybe it's the start of a new age, but equally maybe I don't want to call it treading water either, because that's not, but that's probably the nearest image, if you like, that this is something that might not have happened this year. It's smaller scale than in past years, and breathing.
Thanks to Edinburgh National Festival and Screen Scotland.
Yeah, and I mean, we did think that somehow it would survive, and that has happened. Just to remind everybody, it's going to be running this time from the 18th of August. I think that's right, Graham, isn't it? The Friday through to the 23rd. And so that's a lot shorter than in past years. And that's all, of course, that's part of the reality of saving it at this stage is you can't go wham bam and completely, manically over the top without the resources to do it. That is the reality that it faces. And so it's a festival on a different scale than the past. But I still think there is an advantage to it running alongside all the other festivals that take place in Edinburgh at this time. I think that was always a better move to do that. And I'd like to think that if people are up there for, well, it could be the book festival they're up there for, it could be the Fringe, it could be the International Festival, it could be the Television Festival, so many other things going on. But actually, I don't think that works to the disadvantage of the film festival at all. There are those who like to spread what they do right across all the different festivals there. So, for me, it's if you're going to restore it, having it at this time makes sense.
The ironic thing, however, is that the two venues used this time
Yes.
for all the screen are Edinburgh Everyman and the View next to Edinburgh Playhouse. And some people said part of the problem with the film house, its traditional home, had been caused by the fact that Everyman had opened in Edinburgh and had hoovered up all the best art house films to the detriment of the film house. Now, I'm sure it was more than just that, more complicated than just that.
I'm sure.
So it's slightly ironic that we'll be watching the first time at the Edinburgh National Film Festival at Everyman, which I'm sure we'll enjoy. But we might actually see the opening film for once, because even though we've been going up together easily for 30 years to the Edinburgh National Film Festival, somehow I don't know why we always seem to manage to make tickets for the opening night gala. But this one, Silent Roar, a Scottish film about surfers set in the Outer Hebrides, I think we're actually going to see, which
is a miracle. We did go. There was the night where they did an immediate second screening of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, not giving it quite its full title. And I do remember that. So we did actually see it on the night of the gala, but technically we were at the second screening that night, not the first. And that was about as close as we've ever got. But even then, the director of the film was there, being chaired around the auditorium, which was still, whether that happened at the first screening as well, I don't know. So it was still pretty damn memorable, actually, and it certainly had an atmosphere about it.
I think that was the Odeon, wasn't it, on
Nicholas? I think that's right. I think that's right. I think it was there. But I mean, obviously that's part of the tradition. I mean, great. I hate to think that that we've been snubbed for the galas. It's just that's
it's the gala tends to be the most popular.
Exactly. The first night and the closing night traditionally are the ones, aren't they?
Also, we have to drive up.
Yes.
Unlike a lot of the Christians were from Scotland or had booked hotels, we had to drive up in the first place. So we tend to, but this time I'm pretty sure we're going to see it.
Yeah.
But interesting. Wow. There's a few nods to the past in the very short the running.
Yes.
So they've got Shane Meadows.
Yeah.
Shoes, which was last year 20 years ago. And they've also got the Linda Miles project, which not only involves Mark Cousins, a previous Edinburgh Film Festival director himself, but it's also about Linda Miles, who was the groundbreaking female festival director between 73 and 1980, who really put Edinburgh on the map in terms of international film festivals by championing the new Hollywood movie directors and by also championing, female films and female involvement in film festivals, which at that point were both a bit rare. So even though it's a small program, it's not. It's still linked to the past. It's still linked to the core values of International Film Festival.
I mean, I think that's a logical thing to have done, to remind why this festival matters, why it has been so significant over the years. And if you look at the significant players in doing that, I think it would be mad to jettison tradition and the values that this festival stands for. And I think anyone planning a strategy is always going to look at what past strengths have been, what's marked this festival out. And that would always have to be part of the future as well. I don't ever think you can have a situation of a radical revamp. I mean, I think it's logical that good structures of film festivals, yes, they involve, in this case, well, you should always have championing of Scottish work because it's a Scottish festival. You should always have championing of British work because, of course, that is important as well. And it's not always easy to get releases for those works. And sometimes you see things first at Edinburgh before they go anywhere else. But it's also important to nod to the wider film world, which is what Edinburgh has always done as well. So there's always been the glamour side, if you will, the talent side of the coming to the festival. That maybe has decreased to some extent in more recent years. That the level of talent coming is not, but it's also always given the chance. You mentioned Shane Meadows. There's a very good point. His early success really came about through actually going to festivals like Edinburgh and making an impact in person, and Lars von Trier likewise doing the same. So I think you can't throw out all those traditional elements of the festival that have had an impact, which includes, of course, also the retrospective season, which is what you're mentioning here with the Miles season. That always should be part of any festival tradition as well, where you look again at the work of a great artist, and maybe you see some of the minor works that wouldn't otherwise have been seen, and you get talks as well that connect with that. That is why I've always enjoyed this as a festival, the way that it combines so many different elements that make it very attractive. In any one day, you can do many different contrasting things within it, and that it would be folly not to still have that. As much as the premieres, obviously, again, it's always going to be an attraction of any festival, be it Leeds Film Festival, be it the London Film Festival.
Yeah, but the problem is that Edinburgh lost its position vis-a-vis London Film Festival in new British movies.
Yes.
In the 90s and early noughties, Edinburgh was so popular with British filmmakers that it became the hub for new British film releases and for the British filmmakers to actually hang around at Edinburgh. And I think that's part of the reason that London Film Festival and BFI evolved. I'm led to believe in Edinburgh switching from August.
And led to that move to June rather than being at the heart of the festival, of all the festivals going on. And of course, as they say, when I say money was exchanged, but obviously the festival was given financial incentive to move. That was the case.
That meant effectively that the situation with Shane Meadows and other British filmmakers. I mean, the Train Spot, Danny Boyle and McDonald used to turn in person at Edinburgh, not at first before London, and that situation stopped. So although Edinburgh still championed British film, its opening last year with Aftersung, directed by the Scottish director Charlotte Higgins, starring Paul. And this year it's Silent Roar, which again is another Scottish film, British film. So it still supports it. It hasn't quite got the strength within the British film industry that it had before. And that has been part of the problem the last 10 years. So it'll be interesting to see once they start again next year, doing the full version, hopefully, of the film. Whether they can recapture that position.
I mean,
they have got one. They have got a McDonald. Next year. So they are taking steps to recover the position.
I mean, I said there that I think the appreciation of what's worked in the past is very important. But does a festival also have to look to some extent towards some new element that's going to make it stand out? Is that possible within what is a familiar structure, if you like, for film festivals. Is there any way that a festival can start being radical?
Well, that's what's been a question for about 25 years now, ever since the last director we had who managed to inject ideas rather than just picking really great films and having great guests was he managed to like make watching a film an event that involved ideas about what the nature of the film was and what the nature of filmmaking was, and in a sort of entertaining and provocative way, which no director ever since then has managed to do. So in theory, it is possible, but it hasn't happened that way for a long time. And what Linda Miles brought in the 1970s to the Edinburgh Film Festival hasn't been even vaguely duplicated since Mark Cousins.
No.
So I think if it's going to completely recover its position and be a really strong film festival again, it needs to think beyond just showing good films and new films and challenging films. It has to get more provocative and have more ideas.
Because the discussions surrounding film at a festival is as important as the films themselves. Coordinated thinking, if you like, in the retrospective seasons, but also actually looking at current filmmaking. And there will be the big issues that's going to be discussed soon, one can foresee, is going to be the impact of AI on films. That's going to be the next debating point in cinema, it seems to me. Already we have a situation, obviously, with things like writers' strikes going on, and actors' definite concerns over where they stand in the future with AI. So that surely is going to be a discussion point that festivals will be looking to address, because it's going to directly have an impact on the industry and potentially on jobs within the industry as well. That it seems to me to be inevitable that festivals will be looking to address the subject of the impact of AI in potential future filmmaking. And festivals, I think, probably have to lead that discussion.
Well, it's a good topic to discuss, but if they did discuss it at Edinburgh, which they're not doing this year, I don't think,
No.
you'd have to call it EIFFAI.
Yes.
Which doesn't quite roll off the tongue.
True. But I mean, it is, the point I was making was that the impact on the industry already with things like writers' strikes and whatever going on, and concern about where actors will be, how they will be used in future in films, etc. This is going to be a rising and somewhat immediate pressing concern, and that's why I'm wondering whether actually film festivals should even be looking to be leading that debate already. That should be what a part of a festival point is being. The discussions are always important within festivals, and this is probably the big discussion point at the moment, as opposed to trends, if you like, in filmmaking, but actually the whole concept of where this one thing is going to fit in the filmmaking world.
Yeah, but that's likely to have an immediate impact, because film festivals like Edinburgh are about highlighting and showcasing independent films, and independent films are made as much out of principle as out of commerce, and they'll be the sort of will resist doing AI longest, whereas Hollywood
they will
embrace it more quickly. But I think what could be interesting in the future is when independent filmmakers start to embrace AI, but in a creative way, rather than just like saving money and cutting corners and blah blah blah. You'll have independent filmmakers who will use it to create something different and new, and at that point, film festivals will probably get on board with that. I would have thought.
I can absolutely see that being the case. That would make sense. You're right, Graham. I'm probably trying to get a discussion going actually without much substance there yet to build a structure of actually how you would present that at a festival at this present time. I'm probably being unrealistic in putting that proposal forward. What are you particularly looking forward to about being back in Edinburgh, Graham?
Yeah, well, we could just call it okay? Question mark.
We could. We're looking at embracing the world of the tram culture, of course, Graham.
Yeah, I'm desperate to get on a tram, and also the galleries, maybe a few fringe events, wander the streets. One of the greatest cities in the world for just wandering.
Actually, just absorbing what is happening.
Yeah, but we went to years ago when it was still not a particularly nice place to be, and it was real nothing over in Welsh territory.
Yeah.
But it's been completely transformed, and two of my favourite music acts, both of whom are from Edinburgh, Hamish Hawk and Young Fathers, they both record in different studios in Leith. So we might have a look at that, really, if we get time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, perhaps more predictably, we're all being well, we're going to try and get to Grayson Perry's exhibition, but I think tickets are going to be very much in demand for that. But maybe if we, given how long we're there, we might be able to find a slot for that. And it's obviously it's the big Edinburgh exhibition of the moment. That's the stature that Grayson now has. So maybe that's another one we'll look at, and we'll probably pick and mix a bit from the fringe as well, and reflect on that in our next podcast.
As long as you get thrown out of City Arts Centre, that's all.
Well, I'm going to be on my very best behavior, Graham, to try and avoid any such scenarios of being told that I'm very close to being asked to leave the premises. I do not want that situation this time.
That was so funny. He was really gunning for you. The guy in charge at the reception was just like 1 inch from throwing you out of an art gallery.
I felt I was so innocent in that moment, but clearly I was misjudging myself, not for the first time. So let's hope that none of that happens, and it isn't the Englishman abroad winding up the gentlemanly Scottish man on duty. I'm determined not to let that happen this time.
Whole strand about Edinburgh on a film moment, but not related to Edinburgh. You know the Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan's new about the building of the first atom bomb.
Yeah,
it's undoubtedly going to make $1 billion worldwide.
Is it really?
For that subject is a phenomenal success.
Absolutely. I mean, that is truly remarkable. But I'm really pleased to hear that, because that is, without being patronizing about any film going that happens, but to see a film of that intelligence drawing the audiences actually is really pleasing to see, because if it leads to, maybe I sound so dismissive of the world of the Marvel films or whatever, but actually if it is encouraging filmmaking that looks at the world as it is and the biggest issues that are upon us, and not constantly reaching to bloody fantasy to do it, that would be an interesting development for filmmaking. If there were a conviction there that actually by telling truthful stories about our past and learning how it might affect our future without recoursing to superheroes, etc., that would surely be for the better.
Yeah, but on top of that, first of all, it means that it'll probably get Academy Award nominations, which is good for Lee Murphy, who's a brilliant actor, and the lead role is off. But it also means that if it hadn't been a huge success, the studios would have said, well, okay, Christopher Nolan's hugely successful normally, but we've let him do a intelligent film. It just hasn't worked, so let's not do that again. But the fact that such an intelligent, heavyweight film has made so much money, is making so much money, means that the next time someone wants to make an intelligent film, the studios will go, yeah, maybe it might work. So it could, if we're lucky, a trend for better movie making.
Well, glory be that should be the case. And there are those I understand who like their popcorn movies, but I think the dearth of stimulatingly intellectual filmmaking has been very, very apparent. And this has led to a return to, I mean, the great filmmaking is as much provocative in terms of it, not just emotional reaction, which is one very powerful form of reaction in film going, but also to stir us to think about things beyond just wham bam, the impact of gosh, look what technology can do on the screen. And I think that, and that's not saying I love variety in filmmaking. I think it's hugely important. But actually, as you say, if the studios notice that this has gone well, and if that encourages more of that form of filmmaking, and this is a crap world that we're living in right now, that the role of the arts, as much as anything, is to try to address that and to make those decision makers think bloody again about what they're doing. That is one of the most powerful tools that films can do. That can go back to a Stanley Kubrick film. That can go back to any number of the great 60s films that were made in this country about the state of things. Well, we look forward to discovering new works in Edinburgh. That's always one of the joys for us, and we'll report back that in our next one. Graham, the next subject, if we may, and you've touched on one name already that's amongst the Mercury Music Prize nominees, which is Young Fathers. It's a list this year that 50% male, 17% mixed gender, 33% female, 58% artists of color, 42% artists who are white. This is running from July 2022 to July 2023. The acts that are not there: PJ Harvey, Ed Sheeran, Sam Smith, Gorillaz, Tom Grennan.
Yep. Yeah, worse than that. Hamish is not there.
Lewis Capaldi. So that's interesting that they're not there. So that's the first thing to
Why
embrace.
is Hamish?
But you then ask this interesting
Hamish
question about amongst the artists that are there, actually, how many records are they selling? And that's a really good point, Graham.
really interesting thing. Like I recently got Little Sim's
Yeah.
No Thank You album, which came out last year.
Last year, yeah.
London rap. And No Thanks is a really musical album. It's not like an American rap album full of aggression. It's like measured and sophisticated, and some great tracks like Gorilla, which I think is the best track miles.
Yeah.
But Little Sims actually won the Mercury Prize for Sometimes I Might Be Into That a couple of years ago. And it was a much bigger hit than No Thank You album, which didn't Sometimes I Might Be Into. So I assumed, because Little Sims is famous, let's face it, I assumed that Sometimes it must have sold loads of copies. So I looked into it, and even though it won the Mercury Prize, even though she was nominated for a Brit Award, even though it got a massive push, the sales figures for that album is 60,000. Now, 60,000.
60,000. Yeah, that's pretty damn obscure, isn't it? In terms of scale.
You can't imagine that many Mercury Prize nominees or even winners actually sell as many copies as that, or certainly not more copies than that. So, although I like the Mercury Prize, it's pushing, although it helps music, it doesn't really transform the playing field. They still end up being minor sellers compared to all the huge streaming successes. So the Mercury Prize is a bit like watching. It's a bit like watching footballers who are good enough to be in the Premier League, but somehow found themselves in the Vauxhall Conference, and the Mercury Prize is trying to help them.
Yeah. I mean, the year that Elbow won, and Elbow had been around for a long time before they finally got the Mercury Music Prize success, and it was the catalyst for a while to bigger sales, not actually sustained in the long term. But I mean, I'm looking at the list here of names that may not be that familiar to a lot of people. Olivia Dean, album Messy, Ray, which is a self-released album, by 21st Century Blues, Young Father's Heavy Heavy, Laurel Carner's, which is probably, I think, his second album, Jay Huss's album, Jessie Ware, perhaps the most familiar name along there, Fred again, has had big. He's tipped to be the next big name, isn't he? Ezra Collective, which is the obligatory must have a jazz combo in there, and Lankum, who did have big, I think, comparatively big sales with False Lankum. I think that's the one that actually has, I think, had some Lankum commercial clout. I
actually like Lankum because I find it quiet to listen to.
I'm not thrilled by it particularly. No. I can see.
Very listenable.
Yeah, I'm always, I'm always pleased if there's a new breakthrough that's going into the world of folk. I always think that's a really healthy thing to happen. I'm not saying folk is neglected. It isn't. Radio 2 gives prominent coverage with Mark Radcliffe's show, and actually, if you look at the number of folk festivals from Crop Ready to Kate Rosby's Under the Stars Festival to the wonderful Cambridge Folk Festival, there is a strong tradition of folk festivals, and it's always good to see some form of, and I don't mean crossover in style or in commercially, but that actually a band emerges from there to catch the eye. So those, I don't have the Lankum album, but I have noticed that that they have had success with that, and I always think it's good to bring more new folk acts forward. And so again, I think a welcome. It's interesting again how they choose on. There's always a cross section. You can predict to some extent, I think, interestingly, within Mercury Music Prize, the kind of names that will be there. Usually there's one sort of major act which you might have expected a Sam Smith to be there or whatever, or a Lewis Capaldi that's not. And in some ways, I actually think that's healthy that they're not, because if it goes back to the point that you make, that it's trying to draw attention to a wider range of music that maybe gets some attention on Six Music and not even all the acts on there, that is for the good, because we know very well that when it comes to the Brits, that's all basically about commercial success. Mercury has always had this thing of trying to be broader than that, and that is reflected obviously 58% artists of color to 42% artists white. That in itself actually again is an interesting reflection of British musical culture.
The background of the singer or the musician or if the album, I like the album and that's all really matters to me. But I know that's not really a common thing these days. But what
Yeah.
interests me is that BBC Six Music is right behind the Mercury Prize,
Yep.
and all the musicians actually feature in the Mercury. You'll
Yes.
hear most of them, if
Yes, you
not
will. Yeah.
regularly,
Yeah.
music.
Yeah.
Its viewing, listening figures are definitely more than 60,000.
Mm.
So the question, what sort of influence on listeners does BBC Music have? Because if it's playing all these acts that are nominated for Mercury, but
Yeah.
the end result isn't huge sales,
Mm.
it may just makes me wonder, like, people are listening to BBC Music, obviously, but then they're not actually buying the albums that the station
It's
plugs
pushing.
heavily.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was in the old days of uh, BBC Radio 1, if
Mhm.
John Peel liked something,
Yeah.
it would translate into sales.
It would. Undertones become a successful band. You're absolutely right. Smiths become a successful band. The Fall become a culturally significant for years and years band. It does happen. The specials that he first promoted. I mean, you can name any. You're right. Any number of acts that even Althea and Donna was first played on John Peel.
Exactly. But that's about all I've got to say about the Mercury Prize and Little Sims.
Mm. I, it, are you in some way then suggesting the Mercury Music Prize is, in its time, I think it was seen as culturally significant because it stood away from the crowd. Are you saying it's losing its impact to some extent? Do you think it's, I'm not saying tokenism, but is it something that it's almost becoming a little bit cliched in itself as to who gets nominated? As I was saying, you can kind of predict the artists that are likely to feature there.
Well, yeah, there's always been an element from the very beginning, the Mercury Prize, of albums getting nominated because they make the people nominating it seem cool. A bit
Yeah.
like the old days when the NME would quite often champion
Mm.
bands to make themselves look cool. So there's always been an element of that in the Mercury Prize. I think the main point I'm trying to make is that, the Mercury Prize is basically good,
Yeah.
but the impact it has in the wider world is quite negligible.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
bit like if the Mercury Prize was a music festival, it's not Glastonbury
No.
or the Reading Festival
No.
or even Latitude.
Mm.
It's a small festival in the Northeast,
Yeah.
which is very popular in the
Yes.
Northeast.
Yeah.
People who go there, but
Yeah.
everybody else doesn't know about it.
No. I mean,
That's the only point I'm
if you're
making, really.
looking at that list and you're thinking, well, who might headline Glastonbury next year? You're not looking at
Nobody.
one, are you?
Yeah,
You're not
yeah.
looking at one.
So these are acts which, by definition, aren't going to transform
No,
the music scene,
no.
although they are all usually very interesting acts. Even
Mm,
if you don't like them, they're always of interest.
mm, mm. Well, we shall, as ever, look out for the winner. Sometimes it surprises us, sometimes it doesn't. At this stage, I'm not picking anyone, but actually, I'm going to pick someone. I think they're going to go with Fred again, but we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I think you could be right.
Yeah. Now, Graham, nothing wrong in looking at the world of, again, that another festival that's on in Edinburgh, of course, the book festival. So in the world of books, you're looking, if you like, retrospectively, but also, therefore, the impact of long-term impact, if you like. This is two of the most successful British novels of the last 30 years. Ian McEwan's Amsterdam and Martin Amis's Time's Arrow. And you're looking at what it says about British writers. Which well, let's just ask you what you do think it does say about British writers. These are British novels, British writers. Do they become international, or are they actually significant novels in our culture rather than wider culture? And is that not important that they're not impactful in wider culture? They speak to
That's
us, and therefore that's what their most important resonance is with us in this country.
that's actually a more interesting question than the
Oh,
answer
sorry.
I've got. So there's no way I can match that, Charles. That's way too interesting. No, my thoughts are much more prosaic because basically I read Ian McEwan's Amsterdam, which won the Booker Prize and came out in 1998, and
Yeah.
Martin Amis's Time's Arrow, which was nominated but didn't win,
Yeah.
which came out in 1991. And I read them basically by way of apology because I remember a few weeks back I was criticising Amos and McEwan to a degree about it in a way of comparing it to previous British novelists and classic
Mm.
novelists. And when I said that, I hadn't actually read that much Amos or that much McEwan. So I
Yeah.
felt a bit cheeky. So I thought, I'm gonna read the damn thing so I can see if I was in fact talking complete
Correct.
rubbish. Yeah. Having read them, I sort of like slightly stick to my guns because McEwan's Amsterdam, which is a story about two friends, one of whom is like one of the world's most famous composers of classical music,
Yeah.
a bit like Tar, except obviously male, not female. The
Yes.
film with Kate that we saw earlier
Kate
this year.
Blanchett. Yeah.
And the other main character is high up in the editorial team at one of Britain's biggest newspapers on what was Fleet Street. And
Yeah.
the whole book is about their egos and their ambitions and what they're prepared to do to further their egos and their ambitions and their calling, and what consequence that has for other people and for the friendship. And it's written really well, and it's constantly interesting. But when I read it, I thought, McEwan could actually write Poirot novels. He
Mm.
could write quite normal books. He's got that technical ability, and
Mm.
also, although it isn't lightweight, it isn't hasn't really got that many layers. It's got a
No.
few layers, not like as deep as some great modern novels of the 20th century
Mm.
by Americans or British writers, or especially Europeans. I mean, compared to Dostoevsky,
Mm.
for example, in the 19th century, you know, Amsterdam's definitely lightweight. You could see it as a TV series.
Yeah.
Whereas Martin Amos's Arrow, now that is properly heavy. That's
Yeah.
got so many layers that you can't even dissect them all, which is an unfortunate use of words because it's really about uh, a doctor who was a doctor at Auschwitz,
Ah,
and
yes.
and it's told in reverse. So the book begins with him dying in New York as an old man, having
Mm.
fled at the end of the Second World War and escaped from being captured by the Allies. And it ends with him being born in Germany. And it's told backwards, I think, so that you can approach that terrible man's decision making at all times
Mm.
from a perspective. So, from his perspective, because time goes backwards, as a doctor, because when he escapes, he ends up being a doctor in America in a legitimate fashion, as opposed to
Yes.
in the blooming hole.
Yeah.
He sees things in reverse. So he sees it that hospitals make people ill, and when they're released, they go back to feeling better and being normal. So
Mm.
the whole book makes you question and see events in the opposite way to normal. It makes you think about what is normal, and it also it makes you realize how someone who must have been involved with those terrible, terrible events
Mm.
must have seen the world in an upside down fashion to have behaved in that way in the first place. And so it's a really, really skillful novel, and it's way, way deeper than McEwan's Amsterdam. But at the same time, you couldn't imagine Martin Amis writing a successful Poirot book
No.
because he's just a bit, he's a bit heavier than McEwan. He's not so light in his feet in terms of his use of the English language. He actually wants you to learn something every second, as opposed to being dazzled by his skills. So I thought, yeah, they are good, but especially in the case of McEwan, I didn't see the point. And whereas when you read Graham Greene books, you can always tell what the point is,
Oh,
because
absolutely. Yeah.
McEwan is quite similar in writing style sometimes to Graham Greene. They're both very good writers technically, but Graham Greene's novels had so many points they're making
Mm.
the whole time. McEwan and Amos grew up in a post left wing world, whereas
Yeah.
Graham Greene grew up in a world of communism versus fascism,
Yes.
and so the idea of change possible was a dominant theme. Whereas now, the Amos McEwan generation don't truly believe that positive change is possible, and it
Mm.
affects the meaning of their books.
Does that also mean that we return to Graham Greene books? Somehow they resonate more now. They don't just seem period pieces, but equally, would McEwan's books not have a future audience? Would they not sustain an interest beyond the more immediate times?
I think they do smack of the times. So, for example, Amsterdam to me feels like a Blair Brown New Labour book
Yeah.
in its undertones and themes.
Mm.
So in that way, it has aged. But he's such a skillful writer, McEwan, and he does know how to tell a story, and he
Mm.
usually has a story to tell. So therefore, I think he will survive. But Amos is not quite as mainstream, so I'm not sure what will happen to Amos's novels in 50, 70 years' time, because they're not as entertaining or as obviously they're not as an easy read like McEwan is. So I could see Amos becoming a sort of more of a minor cult type thing, mainly
Would,
because of his ideas rather than the actual stories.
I mean, last question to ask you with that. If it comes to studying either of these authors at university on an English literature course, who's more likely of the two?
It's a long time since I was at Edinburgh University, and everything I believe as much as anywhere else. So when I
Yes,
was there,
fair point. Yeah.
even though Edinburgh was definitely not left wing
No,
at all. I mean,
no. Mm.
students in the faculty laugh at the socialist worker students who used to barricade themselves in lecture buildings and do sit-ins for days on end,
Yeah.
and no one's because the days of that sort of stuff had passed. But the underlying tone of all my professors and all my lectures was a sort of Marxist analysis of the world.
Yes.
It wasn't a
Yes.
Marxist,
No.
but the understanding of how the world operated
Mm,
at the level in politics and the economy
mm,
was so accepted that it was just naturally part of the flow. And I
mm.
can't believe that's here anymore. So I couldn't even hazard a guess
No.
who did want it in English
Mm,
literature at university these days. I would guess McEwan just because he's not that controversial
no.
and he's a skillful writer. Whereas Amos is always trod dangerously a little bit. He'd get involved with themes and ideas which could cause offence in a way that McEwan doesn't really. So I would guess that it'd be McEwan.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because you'd think the intellectual, if you like, the intellectual heavyweight of the two. Martin Amis is always seen as the great powerhouse intellectual writer, and not least on the subject that you've highlighted there, the world of Nazism that he's written about so prominently.
You've been listening to the podcast Two Big Egos in a Small Car. Your hosts were Graham Chalmers and Charles Hutchinson. This was a Baltic sub-production.